In today's Masterpiece interview, Jack and Mark discuss bakeries and awards.
Listen, Jack, you understand, I hear, you know a lot about awards.
Well, I know a lot about awards because, I got laid off at the bakery. I used to put the holes in the bagels, and my holes weren't in the middle, and I got fired. So I really had to pursue something to deal with my grief and rejection. And I saw someone getting an award on television, and I thought, this has been going on for a long time. Academy Awards, the Gemini Awards, award for best face. And so I thought, I'm going to research it.
I'm just curious. I thought you had won the award for Employee of the Month at that bakery.
I did, but I started resting on my laurels. They don't put up with holes. They were all lopsided. I could not get the holes in the middle. I think I just wanted to move on. I needed new challenges in life.
Well, the time had come.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw myself out into the shark pool of unemployment and see how it goes. And I can always fall back on my bagel expertise, take some retraining, and maybe get a job.
But not putting in holes.
Well, that's what I'm good at.
Oh, you're good at putting in holes.
If I don't become despondent or distracted.
Well, despondency is a big issue in the bakery industry.
The grumpy baker is a cliche. You got to get up at like 3 a.m. and you got to start punching the crap out of dough. I mean, it's a very violent job, very aggressive. If you start letting your aggression get the better of you, then you start punching more than just dough. You start punching your own self-esteem.
Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically speaking, yes. I did punch myself in the face one time, but that was an accident.
Well, I'd like to hear about that.
Well, I was exercising my forearm dough kneading muscles. I thought I should increase the strength of my forearm. So I got this big rubber band and I put it on a doorknob and I would stretch it and I'd stretch it towards me, you see, and then the rubber band broke and I punched myself in the face. I was unconscious for 8 hours.
I heard that your best friend from next door found you.
Yeah, he did. Kept knocking on the door and say, where the fuck are my bagels? I promised him some bagels because I owed him $20. It's a good thing I owed that guy money. He wouldn't have come around pounding for bagels.
What was his name? He had a funny name, didn't he? Wasn't it Cream Cheese Moynihan?
Oh, yeah. Well, Cream Cheese Moynihan. We were at a competition bagel place. He was trying to create his own moniker so as to create a name for himself. He felt that if he had a name in the industry, he could go work for anyone and not get bullied by the head baker. He got an award.
Oh, what was the award?
Well, he got an award for being able to throw the biggest ball of dough the greatest distance because they have the Baker Olympics.
The year after the Olympics.
Yeah, you don't hear much about it, but there's nothing more entertaining than watching a bunch of bakers in full gab trying to high jump over a 16-foot ball of dough. And some of them fall into it.
Well, yeah. There was the story of Baker's Dozen Mahoney.
He was one of the big thugs that tried to take over the whole industry. He used to just break in, take the head baker, and put him in an apple pie. Not kill him, but he would bake him. He would force everyone to make this humongous tub of apple pie, and he'd put the baker in it, and he said, look this is what's going to happen if you don't follow my instructions and start paying protection money. You got to pay him money to protect them from him.
But didn't he have a horrible fate?
It's an ironic fate. He was going on his way to collect on another bakery that hadn't been paying him, and he was run over by a runaway Wonder Bread truck. And he hated Wonder Bread because he couldn't take them over. They're too big.
I heard that there was some kind of giant ball of dough that had rolled into him, and he was somehow smothered up in himself. When they removed them, there was a cavity in his shape.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's in the Museum of Baking still to this day. He got hit by the Wonder truck. He went on a trajectory like 50 feet, and they really slammed into him. And then, again, ironically, there was the same baker that he was going to go and harass for protection money was delivering their big pickup truck full of dough for the day. And he just landed right in that thing.
Oh, and it was just a big, long cylinder, like in those Bugs Bunny cartoons, of his shape with his legs and arms stuck out almost right through the big thing of dough.
Yeah, and he was dead when he was in the dough already.
Yeah, well, it was horrible.
But there wasn't a lot of tears shed. And then the driver for the Wonder Truck, he got an award.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for hitting and sending a major mafia thug on the farthest trajectory of pretty much anyone.
Well, didn't that become one of the Bakery Olympic events in honor of that incident?
Oh, there was, yes. They would always have the effigy of Baker Dozen Maloney, and they would just have an effigy of him, and the Wonder Truck would get about a 50-yard run. And it's hard. It's hit the effigy. It has to sail through the air, the greatest distance, and land also in the big ball of dough in the back of a pickup.
But wasn't there like a sister event where the participants were the ones being hit by this Wonder Bread truck?
Oh, the participants.
It was really part of a biathlon. Stage one of the biathlon was the participants, the athletes. They would call them Bake Elite because they were bakers slash athletes. So the Bake Elites would be driving the truck. This was testing their skill at driving and aiming, and they would see how far the effigy can go. And in the stage two of the biathlon, they would be the ones that would be hit. And they were supposed to see how long they could sail in the air without landing.
Oh, yeah, well, that was the extreme event. Getting hit by a truck, that's no small banana.
No.
So they had to wear goalie equipment so they didn't get injuries. It's like boxing, and then there's extreme kickboxing, and that event was parallel to something like that.
So you finally decided to hang up your oven mitts and leave the baking industry to do something else.
I did. And I suddenly found quite quickly that I was quite unemployable. I tried to get a job at an investment firm, and they'd say, "Where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I said, "In 5 years, I wouldn't mind having my own bagel shop."
You may leave, but you'll always be sucked in.
Yeah, and they'd say, "Do you know anything about hedge funds?" They didn't really consider me to have a lot of experience.
Right.
Even though I tried to bribe them with a baker's dozen.
Baker's dozen of what?
Baker's dozen of bagels.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I never showed up at an interview without a box of bagels.
Now tell me the story about the phrase baker's dozen. A dozen is 12. A baker's dozen is 13. What's the story behind that?
That goes way back.
Greek times, I heard.
In the Greek times, there was the famous guy, he started one of the first bakeries. He decided that...
Well, he had 13 wives.
Yeah, he did.
Back in those days, you were only allowed to have 12 wives. So he said, well, yeah, I have a dozen wives. And a dozen was, for him, it was 13. That way he got around the law.
Oh, yeah, he was quite clever. And people let him get away with it. Because who can resist someone who says, "I want to buy 12 bagels," and he gives you 13? Who's going to complain?
Well, back in those days, bagels were quite popular.
Oh, and they used it as a secret weapon against the Phoenicians. They come in their boats, and in the treasury, they put all this dehydrated dough in the treasure chests, and they just sprinkled a bit of gold doubloons on top of it. And Phoenicians, they all piled that into their boat.
I heard the Greeks bombarded their boats with yeast, so all the dough started to rise.
But yeah, in the heat of the day, it was like a ticking time bomb. Caught unsuspecting. The day got hot and that yeast started activating, and it literally started baking a big loaf inside of the chests, which they thought were full of gold, but they weren't. And these lids would burst open, and the bread would keep rising, and it would, and then burst right through the hole, and all the boats would sink.
That was Archimedes that came up with that plan.
Yeah, Archimedes took claim for everything, though.
Oh, you don't think it was him?
Well, I don't know. I mean, ever since he invented the screw, he took claim to anything. I'm not sure if he invented anything else but the screw.
Oh, you think the screw was his only invention?
He claimed to have invented horseshoes.
Well, a horseshoe is just a letter U made out of metal. The Greeks were big typesetters. They used all those Greek letters, but they were always missing, like they couldn't spell words that had a U in them, like understand and uvula and vacuum. So he invented the horseshoe, the U.
As a letter.
That was his font.
And then they just found out that they could also put it on the hoof of a horse.
That was the magic.
That's where serendipity comes in the world of creation. And I think he got an award for that.
And back full circle. What was the award he got?
A pile of bricks.
Oh.
Well, bricks were pretty valuable, in those days. I mean, you can't just go buy bricks at the hardware store. And then they got his slaves to build them a baker's oven. They're always working on new military dough weapons. There was, when they would encircle an enemy, and the enemy's getting really hungry, and then they start lobbing these loaves of bread at the enemy.
Right.
And the loaves are designed to give them horrible gas.
Bread was flat, and they would put yeast in the bread just before they launched it. The guys would eat it because they were hungry, and then the loaves would rise in their stomach, and they became bloated.
And then, of course, at night, they build a fire, and all this methane gas is being released. Creates these raging infernos, and there's exploding enemies everywhere. It was actually quite horrible. Human beings exploding.
The next day, there'd be thousands of bodies just littering the battlefield.
People don't realize that this was all a secret dough recipe weapon. It was used by Funginitis funginitis, or his nickname was just yeast.
Well, don't forget about Homer.
Oh, yeah, Homer.
Well, you know why they called him Homer? Because like he was a big sports fan, but he only rooted for the home team. He would play by play for all the sports, but he was always rooting for the home team. He was very biased. That's why they called him Homer.
Well, that makes sense.
He left sports broadcasting and became a writer.
Little known, his second, third cousin who wrote the Iliad, home recipes for a military yeast warfare.
That book spread like wildfire, and once that book got out, everybody was on equal terms. So then they had to sign anti-yeast treaties.
It was like the arms treaties that they had nowadays with nuclear arms.
Yeah.
That gets into the population spread supply, and it could just decimate with methane gas problems and bloating.
Now, what about Hippocrates?